Hi, I'm John. The autumn sun shone through the tall oak trees, casting soft shadows on our large family estate. Today, the place was filled with the chatter of relatives as we held our annual family reunion. The warm air smelled of roasting meat and fresh pie. My wife, Anna, who was very pregnant and glowing, stood beside me, smiling as we greeted cousins, uncles, and aunts arriving in large groups. "Honey, isn't it wonderful to have everyone here?" I asked. Anna squeezed my hand, her eyes scanning the crowd. "It is, but stay close. You know how your mom can be," she whispered. I noticed my mother, Helen, moving through the crowd, her eyes sharp and observant. As the day went on, the polite greetings turned into deeper conversations. Julia, my cheerful sister-in-law, joined Anna and me near the edge of the garden, offering some relief from my mother's watchful gaze. "So, John, that new case you're working on sounds tough, huh?" Julia asked, trying to shift the topic, which I appreciated. "Yeah, it's complicated, but it's nothing compared to handling family dynamics," I joked, though my eyes drifted toward where my mother was standing with my aunts, occasionally glancing at us. Anna noticed and tensed. "I wish she would just say what's on her mind. This silent judgment is exhausting," she muttered. "She just wants what's best for me, or at least that's what she thinks," I sighed. As the sun began to set, everyone gathered around a long table on the lawn for dinner. The air was filled with the sound of conversation, the clinking of silverware, and glasses raised in toasts. It was almost perfect, until my mother sat directly across from Anna and me. "John, I've noticed you've been busy with work lately. I hope you're still making time to ensure Anna is comfortable," Helen said, her voice sharp enough to make a few relatives stop eating for a moment. "Mom, Anna's doing great, right, dear?" I said, placing my hand on Anna's. "Yes, Helen, I'm fine and capable of looking after myself, but thank you for your concern," Anna replied, politely but firmly. Helen's lips thinned as she paused, her fork in the air. "Well, with the baby coming, you can't be too careful. I read an article the other day about how important it is for expectant mothers to avoid stress." "Really, Helen, I'm fine. John's been wonderful, and Julia has been a great help, too," Anna said, trying to shift the conversation. Julia quickly caught on and jumped in. "Absolutely, and wait till you see the nursery we've been working on. John, maybe you should show your mom the photos. It's coming together really nicely." And with that, the dinner continued. Helen's comments became sharper with each passing moment, subtly criticizing Anna's choices, from her diet to her decision to keep working late into her pregnancy. The tension at the table grew, and relatives exchanged uncomfortable glances. Finally, I stood up, tapping my glass to get everyone's attention. "I'd like to propose a toast," I said, "to family, by blood and by bond. May we always support and uplift each other, no matter what." Everyone raised their glasses in agreement, and for a brief moment, the mood lightened, but Helen's tight smile as she sipped her wine told me that the evening wasn't going to end peacefully. As the sky darkened, I had a feeling the real trouble was yet to come. Later in the evening, the warm atmosphere of the reunion started to fade, replaced by unease. The laughter and happy conversations that had filled the grand hall earlier were now replaced with a tense silence as we all moved toward the dining area for dessert. "Anna, wait till you try the lemon tart I brought. It's Julia's favorite," Aunt Margie said brightly, trying to lift the mood. "Oh, I'm sure it's wonderful. Julia's been talking about your baking all day," Anna replied, smiling as she linked arms with Julia. The two of them headed upstairs together, their dresses similar in style. But behind them, Helen's eyes narrowed as she mistook Julia for Anna. Her steps quickened, driven by a mix of resentment and a misguided sense of protectiveness. "I need to speak with you now, Anna," Helen called out, her voice sharp and urgent, but she was really calling out to Julia. Julia turned around, confused. "Helen, I think you," she started, but before she could finish, Helen, acting on impulse, pushed Julia. Thinking it was Anna, Julia lost her balance and fell down the stairs. The sound of her fall filled the hall, followed by horrified gasps as she hit the ground with a thud. "Julia!" Anna screamed, rushing down the stairs as the family stood in shock. Helen froze at the top of the staircase, her face pale as she realized the terrible mistake she had made. I pushed through the crowd, my instincts as a lawyer kicking in despite the personal horror unfolding in front of me. "Someone call an ambulance," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. John's command cut through the chaos as he knelt beside Julia, assessing her injuries. "Why would you do this, Helen? She's your niece." Anna's voice trembled with a mix of rage and fear. "Helen, flustered and stammering, waved her hands helplessly. I thought she was you. I just wanted to talk. By pushing her down the stairs? John's voice was cold, his eyes searching his mother's face for an explanation that made sense. Moments later, Julia was taken away on a stretcher, and the house fell into a heavy silence. John pulled Helen aside, his tone a mix of disbelief and authority. What's going on, Mom? Your behavior tonight wasn't just out of line, it was dangerous. What did you think Aita was going to do? It's all those articles and talk shows, Helen muttered, wringing her hands. They say some women trap men with pregnancies. I thought she was manipulating you. Manipulating me? Anna's my wife. We're expecting a baby together. How could you believe such nonsense about her? John's frustration mounted as he ran a hand through his hair, struggling to understand how the mother he once knew had become someone driven to hurt out of irrational fears. I got scared, and seeing her, or who I thought was her, brought it all up, Helen admitted, her voice breaking. John shook his head, trying to process her words. Anna needs me, and Julia deserves justice. We're going to sort this out, but right now, I can't even look at you. He turned back to Anna, who stood by the door, her eyes red and swollen from tears. John's resolve hardened as they both waited for news about Julia's condition. The night air felt heavy with everything left unsaid, and the trust that had once bonded the family now lay shattered. The joyful reunion had dissolved into a harsh, sobering reality. As they faced the consequences of a misunderstanding that almost took a life, the hospital's fluorescent lights hummed quietly. John paced the narrow corridor outside Julia's room, deep in thought. Inside, Anna sat beside her sister, holding her hand as the soft beeping of medical monitors filled the air. The weight of the night's events pressed heavily on John as he considered the next steps. When John returned from the security office, he held a USB drive in his hand, the small device feeling heavy with what it contained. I got the CCTV footage from the house, he said. It's clear. Helen saw Julia and pushed her, no hesitation. Anna's tired, red eyes filled with confusion and pain. Why would she do this, John? It doesn't make any sense. Her voice cracked. It was deliberate. Anna, she thought she was pushing you. It's twisted, but it's right there, in black and white. Just then, the door opened, and Dr. Simmons walked in, his face serious. Julia is stable, but she has a concussion and a broken leg. It's going to be a long recovery. Thank you, doctor. Can we have a moment? John asked, his voice calm but firm. The doctor nodded and left the room. Once alone, John turned to Anna. I need to show you something. It's going to be hard to watch, but you need to see how far this went. They watched the footage on John's laptop. In the silent, grainy black and white video, they saw the terrible moment when Helen pushed Julia, sending her tumbling down the stairs. Anna gasped, her hand flying to her mouth as tears welled up in her eyes. Oh God, John, she really thought she was pushing me. John took a deep breath, his face serious. Anna, I've been thinking, we can't just let this go. Julia deserves justice, and we need to protect you and the baby. Anna looked at him, her voice trembling. What are you saying? I'm saying that my mother needs to face the consequences. I'm going to press charges. But she's your mother, John. Can we really go through with this? If we don't, what then? She nearly killed Julia. What if next time, it's you or our child? Anna slowly nodded, her own resolve strengthening. You're right, it's just hard. I know, John said softly, but it's necessary, for all of us. John stepped out of the room and made a few calls. He contacted the family attorney, explaining the situation and his intentions. The wheels were set in motion, and there was no turning back. Yes, I understand the consequences, but I can't let this go. She has to be held accountable, John said firmly, determination in his voice. Back in the hospital room, Anna's phone buzzed. It was a text from her brother-in-law, Michael, who had just heard about the incident. Is it true? What happened? Is Julia okay? Anna quickly responded, explaining what had happened and John's decision to press charges. Michael replied almost immediately, you have our full support. This is unimaginable, but necessary. John re-entered the room, gently squeezing Anna's shoulder. The lawyer's on board. We'll start the proceedings as soon as Julia is able to give her statement. The next few days blurred into a whirlwind of legal discussions and tense family meetings. Relatives took sides, some couldn't believe Helen's actions, while others openly condemned her. John found himself increasingly isolated from many family members he had once been close to, his decision creating deep rifts that felt impossible to mend. One evening, as John and Anna sat quietly in the hospital cafeteria, Anna reached for his hand. "No matter what happens, we're in this together, right?" "Right, together," John replied, his voice steady and his grip firm. They returned to Julia's room, and John looked from his wife to his sister-in-law, his heart hardening for the battle ahead. The truth was unraveling, and with it, the image of a family that had once seemed unbreakable. In the courtroom, the air was tense, broken only by the shuffling of papers and occasional whispers. At the front, Helen sat rigidly beside her lawyer, her gaze fixed straight ahead. Across the room, John stood with Anna, preparing to witness his mother face justice. The judge entered, and the room fell silent. "This court is now in session," his voice echoed through the chamber. The prosecutor rose, holding a stack of papers, her voice clear and confident. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, we are here to address a serious act of violence, one that could have ended in tragedy. We will show that Helen acted not out of confusion, but out of malice, endangering the life of her niece, Julia, whom she mistakenly believed to be her daughter-in-law, Anna." Helen's lawyer then stood, his tone measured and composed. "We acknowledge the gravity of the situation. However, we argue that this was a misunderstanding, fueled by concern, not an intent to harm." Helen's lawyer began. As the trial unfolded, witnesses recounted the events of that fateful night. When Anna took the stand, her voice was steady, but filled with emotion. "I never thought we'd be here, facing such a heartbreaking family rift. Julia was mistaken for me, and it was no accident, it was intentional." The key moment came when the CCTV footage was presented. The prosecutor played the video, and the courtroom watched in stunned silence as the stark, undeniable images showed Helen pushing Julia. Gasps filled the room at the clarity of Helen's actions. John, watching the footage, felt torn between his roles as a son and an attorney, each frame of the video landing like a personal blow. When John was called to testify, he spoke of his mother's growing resentment and paranoia. "It pains me deeply, but I must stand for what is just. My mother's actions were deliberate and dangerous," he said, his voice steady but heavy with emotion. Finally, Helen took the stand. Her voice trembled as she spoke. "I thought I was protecting my son. I saw what I believed was a threat to his future, to our family's honor. I'm sorry, truly sorry, but it was a mistake." The jury didn't deliberate for long. The evidence was overwhelming. Soon, the judge delivered the verdict. Based on the evidence presented, the jury finds the defendant, Helen, guilty of aggravated assault. The sentencing was swift: years of probation and a restraining order to protect Anna and her unborn child. The weight of the judge's words seemed to echo through the courtroom, a finality settling over everyone present. After the trial, as the crowds dispersed, John and Anna stood together outside. The tension of the past week seemed to lift, if only slightly. Anna looked up at John, her eyes filled with both sorrow and relief. "It's over, but how do we move on from this?" John took her hand, his voice calm yet resolute. "We rebuild, together. We focus on our future, on our family. We make sure our child knows love, not resentment." Their commitment to each other and their future child remained unshaken. And that concludes our story. What a journey it's been. Now, here's a question for all of you. If you were in John's position, would you press charges against a family member to uphold justice? Or would you find another way to resolve the situation to preserve family bonds? It's a tough choice between moral duty and family loyalty.